Bine v-am regăsit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Față în Față. Astăzi, împreună cu mine, se află un avocat american bine cunoscut în comunitatea noastră, domnul Robert Perkins. Robert Perkins este un avocat de immigration și astăzi vine cu informații noi pentru comunitatea noastră, pentru cei care ar putea beneficia de o lege nouă. Deoarece Robert Perkins nu vorbește românește, această discuție va avea loc în limba engleză, însă conținutul și informațiile sunt foarte importante și rugăm pe cei care înțeleg limba engleză să comunice și altor colegi, prieteni și membri din familie despre aceste informații pe care le vom aduce în fața dumneavoastră astăzi. Robert, welcome to the program. I just introduced you briefly, so our viewers know that this conversation is going to take place in English rather than Romanian because you haven't been able to learn Romanian yet.
Vorbesc românește foarte puțin, but thank you to the viewers for their tolerance to the fact that I'm not fluent, so I appreciate that.
Well, speaking of the Romanian language, you have Romanian sounds in your house. You have a Romanian wife.
Yeah, I've been married to my wife since 96. We've been together since 1994. I got my first Romanian asylum case in 1990. And that's basically how I got started in immigration law. I, at that time, was doing the cases pro bono. And that lady who I first got asylum for actually fixed me up with my wife a couple years later. So that's how my whole family grew, basically. And we have 2 kids now. I can't believe I'm saying this to you, who are now 14 and 15. And yeah, I've been part of the Romanian family for, over 20 years now. So.
And as I mentioned in the introduction, a lot of Romanians that are watching today probably met with you or heard of you. And this time, I'd like to talk to you about your practice. You are an immigration attorney, and you've been working in this field for how long?
Pretty much since about 1989. I became an attorney in 89. I started doing it pro bono. And eventually, just asylum cases, and then got into sponsorship through an employer, other types of immigration. So now I've been doing immigration solely for 25 years and also have taught at University of Illinois Law School. So that's been my principal focus. I really enjoy the area.
Why immigration? Why immigration law?
It kind of picked me, to be honest. I just was fascinated to learn about other people, their countries, their cultures. Romania in particular, it has such a heartbreaking history, although I understand that things are getting better there now. I know there's a lot of enthusiasm with the new president and everything. But it was always very interesting to me to learn how other people live, what their perspective was, and how different it was. So it was kind of a passion and an interest. It was more fun than work, and still is.
You mentioned that you started doing asylum cases. Are asylum cases still cases that the type of cases you work for Romanian families, or those went away? They
pretty much mostly went away after 1997. You see a few of them that are viable, but sometime around the mid-90s, I switched my practice and did a lot of work sponsorship type situations, and also investors. As you well know, a lot of Romanians are entrepreneurs. So I learned that area of the law just because I've been in the community so long that I had to. But I also found it very interesting too. One of the things I like about the immigration law is that you wear many hats, Sometimes you wear your deportation defense hat. Sometimes you wear your asylum hat. Sometimes you wear sort of a business hat or an employment type hat. So it's been nice to be able to serve people and, know about all the variety of different things that are out there that exist.
Speaking of deportation, I know personally of some cases where people are in deportation. They were just simply picked up and they were in the waiting. I don't even know exactly where they're at, but they're being held somewhere, and they're due to be deported. When they get that far, is there any hope for them?
It depends. It's all very case by case. This new executive order that we're going to talk about in the next segment will help some of these people. Some of them may have asylum cases. There's also a defense to deportation called cancellation. If you've been here for 10 years and you have U.S. citizen children, that's something that might exist for some people. So it really depends on the situation. Sometimes also, if you're creative and the government makes some kind of procedural error, you can also terminate the proceeding. So it really depends, to be honest. Those cases can be a little more complicated, and they're case by case.
Also, another scenario which is rare in the Romanian community, but I think it's interesting for us to know. In a situation when, for example, a young man who came with his family when he was 2 years old or 3 years old, very young, he came into this country. His family was supposed to handle all his immigration papers, and they did to a degree. Maybe he got a green card. Mm-hmm. And then when he became a teenager, he got into trouble. He got arrested. He got a felony. He served time in jail. He got out of jail, and the first thing that happens, immigration picks him up and places him in deportation.
Right. Well,
it's crazy.
It is. It's an extra penalty, and in many cases, it's, the punishment is exceeding the crime. And I know of such cases. For example, I have one now in my office where, young man who has an addiction problem, a family I got asylum for in 1995, and he has no ties to Romania anymore. So, so there are defenses for that as well. That you can assert. So in the case of a felony, there's something called post-conviction, where you can go and maybe change the plea a little bit in the criminal court, and it'll have a dramatic consequence in immigration court. So there are creative things that you can do if you really know the law well. So.
Well, I'm talking about these old scenarios because I want the viewer to see the difference between what it is and what it will be after this new change that's taking place. Also, another scenario that I want to run by is a mother and daughter. They came here 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they came for medical procedures for the daughter who needed some medical procedures. They overstayed their visa. They've been here all this time without any type of immigration status. Do they have any hope to, with this, up until this point, before the law, any hope for them?
It'd be difficult because they're out of status. So with the employment-based immigration, it'd be difficult. In terms of anything with the new law, we can talk about what the requirements are, whether they fit in, but it'd be very difficult for a situation like that. Yeah.
Out of all the cases that you've worked up until this point, before this this new law came into becoming reality, because we've been waiting on this. By the way, do you have any insights why it took so long?
We're in an age where our government is not as effective as it was. There's a lot of partisanship, contentiousness, regardless of what side of the political fence anybody is in. I think everybody can agree that unfortunately, things aren't working well. So, and I think immigration is part of it. It's you have a Republican president, George W. Bush, who tried very hard in 2007 to try to pass immigration reform. Didn't happen. You have Barack Obama, trying very, very hard also to pass immigration reform since he's been elected in 2012. Hasn't happened. So I think that it's part of sort of the general, problems that we see in Washington, unfortunately. So.
Are you happy with this law, the way it is now?
Yeah, I'm very happy with it. I think it opens up a lot of possibilities for people. It would be nice if Congress could pass something. The president was only able to go as far as he could as the executive, and there's certain limits to that. And it would have been nice to see something that exceeded those limits. But largely I'm happy. I feel and hope that the president will extend this not only to people with U.S. citizen kids, that is at least the general executive order, but also to anybody that's been here for the 5 years as well. And I think there's a chance he might, there's a chance he might. We'll see how it develops. I think part of it is to see how immigration reacts to the flood of applications that they're going to get in the next 6 months or so.
Well, this concludes our first segment, and we're going to take a short break. We'll come back and we'll talk about it. We'll find out what's going on with this new law, who is really going to be able to benefit from it. Vom reveni după această scurtă pauză. Rămâneți alături de noi. We'll be right back. Community Optical Center este o ramură a misiunii International Missions Alliance. Pentru examinare optică de doctori cu o vastă experiență în domeniu, sunați la 773 486 7661. Avem o gamă extraordinară de ochelari de cea mai bună calitate, la un preț deosebit de scăzut. Pentru informații și programări ne puteți contacta la 773 486 7661. Am revenit în studio și astăzi, împreună cu avocatul Robert Perkins, discutăm despre legea emigrației. Vom avea acest dialog în limba engleză și vom aduce informații importante pentru întreaga comunitate. Deci vă rugăm să le comunicați și celorlalți pe care îi cunoașteți, care nu înțeleg limba engleză, despre aceste informații. Okay, we're back, and now is the main subject about this new executive order that's supposed to help immigrants. Who are really the ones that are going to benefit from this law?
Sure. What I'm going to do is kind of first talk about the main executive order for people that are out of status. And then I'm going to mention a couple real exciting possibilities for other people, particularly within the Romanian community, that I think might benefit. But the main executive order is for people that have been here since January 1st of 2010. That's the key date. They've been here since that time.
Okay. So what if they were here before that date?
Before that date
doesn't apply.
It does apply, as long as they're here before that date. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
before that date.
So they have to be here before January 1st, 2010.
Correct.
Okay.
And they could have come legally or illegally. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Okay. The other part of this, and this kind of gets into, is they have to be out of status. So if they entered illegally to begin with, or in the case of a lot of people in the community, they may have entered legally to begin with a visa, but that visa is expired. So as long as they've been here before that date, then they qualify. So that's the first requirement.
Okay.
The second requirement is that they have to have a son or daughter that's a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. Permanent resident means has a green card. One thing I want to say that I'm just going to mention briefly on the program is that under U.S. immigration law, a stepson or a stepdaughter is considered the same as a son or daughter, or an adopted son or adopted daughter, although there's conditions for adoption, they're also considered the same. So it opens up some possibilities for people, or again, they can be a green card holder. For example, let's say I have a son or daughter who is married to a citizen and they got their green card, then I qualify under this law. So,
Okay, so people who do not have a relative that has a green card or who is a U.S. citizen are not included in this?
No, unfortunately not. They would have to look for other avenues unless the president expands the executive order to cover those people.
What's the logic? It's really strange that they put that requirement in. Is there a reason? Do you know what's the logic behind that decision?
I think part of it is what the president is doing is as the chief executive officer, it's his responsibility to enforce the law. So what this is, and I know you're going to ask me more details about, is deferred action. It's basically the government's decision to say we're not going to deport certain people. So I think as a matter of humanity and family unity, those people with immediate family here, kids, that are citizens or green card holders, obviously it makes a lot of sense to say we don't want to break up families. So I think that's the logic behind it, or part of the logic behind it.
It makes sense, but it's going to exclude a lot of people.
It's good. Yeah, it's unfortunate because I personally see people and they've been here a long time. You mentioned a mother and daughter that had been here for 20 years, and those are people we might want to give status to. So the only thing we can hope is that the president might expand this. As he is getting late in his term, things like that, there's always that possibility.
What is the process? How does somebody, and when is this law actually going to be effective?
It's effective now, and they're going to start accepting applications no later than June 20th. It may be before then, but it will not be after then. So there is some talk about moving the date up. I don't know if that's just rumor or what it is, but our office is actually starting to get people ready now because the people have to show that they've been here for the last 5 years. And sometimes with people that are here and they're out of status, they don't have bank accounts or credit cards or things like that. So you have to be really creative as far as documenting from January 1st, 2010 to now that they've been here.
What are the requirements? You just mentioned they have to show some kind of a documentation that they've been here. So being here is one of the requirements.
Yes, that's one of the requirements, is a continuous physical presence. So also they can't have committed any kind of significant crime. What it is any kind of felony or what they call a significant misdemeanor. One of the things I want to mention, significant misdemeanors include burglary. It does include DUI. So although the executive order says that that they still can grant this benefit even to people with those items if there are other humanitarian factors. But obviously people with any kind of conviction need to be very careful before applying, because if they have a crime that immigration does consider serious, it could lead to deportation. So you want to be careful about that.
So if you are in that situation, what do you recommend? If they do have some kind of a criminal record?
Sure. I mean, obviously you need to see an attorney. I think that's really important. Call our offices if you need to. And we can give you some advice on whether we think the humanitarian factors might override the conviction. Some of it might depend on how old is the conviction. Do you have, other factors such as medical factors, other things that might, help the situation. But I think you have to be very careful with that.
What other documentations are required to be able to apply for this adjustment?
Again, it's going to be case by case, but I think the main thing is to prove the continuous residence. So if, for example, you have your own business, maybe that business has been incorporated for a while, we'll submit the corporate papers. So some of it's going to be case by case, but I'm a big believer too in pictures. Especially these days, people take a lot of pictures with their phone. The pictures could be over the course of some years, and you can even use those. There's other things people might use. Let's say they've been shopping at the same place for a number of years. and they may have receipts that are dated, maybe coupled with a letter from the store owner saying, hey, these people have been my customer for a certain number of years. They come in and buy clothes from me. Here's, 25 clothes receipts, and, I know these people personally. So there's a variety of ways that you can document the continuous presence. Again, it's a little bit case by case.
I know it's probably hard for you to say this, but I'm going to ask anyway. How difficult do you think it is for these cases to be rejected or accepted?
I think it's pretty easy for them to be accepted. They've had this program in place for people that entered the United States before they were 16. There's a lot of people, some within the Romanian community, but a lot within the Mexican-American community that were brought over here very young. And for those people, for the last 3 years, they've had this deferred action in place. And it's exciting because I've seen these people really gain a lot of things in terms of their rights. So I think it's going to be pretty easy to adjudicate these applications. I just read yesterday that the government is hiring 1,000 new immigration officers to look these applications over and decide them. So,
is there a deadline?
There's no deadline. The applications will start being accepted on June 20th of 2015 or before, but I think probably it is going to be June 20th. Our office is getting people ready now. And because we know there's going to be a flood of people, the government has said in their frequently asked questions that that they're probably not going to impose any kind of deadline, which is kind of nice because then there's less stress and things like that. So,
does immigration charge a fee?
They do. Because a work card is related to this, there's a $465 government fee for the application.
That's in addition to the legal fees.
In addition to the legal fees. But I did want to mention that I've been in the Romanian community for a long time, since 1990, and that community has supported me and my family. So our fees are going to be extremely low, I think, for this benefit. We feel, my wife and I, that this is our way of giving back to the community that helped us to build our family. So,
oh, that's very nice. How can people contact you? Do you have a number, or what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. Our Chicago number has been around for about 20 years. It's 312-461-1199. So that's the number of our Chicago office. And that office is, basically around and still available to the community. And, or they can email. I have an email. It's robert@immigration-professor.com.
Robert@immigration.professor?
You can just do robert@immigration-professor. I have that one too.
All together?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, robert@immigration-professor. By the way, are you still teaching?
I'm not teaching. I'm not teaching at the moment. I had to give it up because I have 2 kids. But I actually anticipate going back to teaching again. One of the things I do is actually to mentor other attorneys in other parts of the country on immigration law, trying to teach them this area, which has become weird and complicated and things like that. So. That's one of the things I do. I give seminars as well. So I'm still teaching, but not, I was at University of Illinois, but not at a university at the moment.
In closing, a final thought that I'd like to ask you. Out of all the cases you've worked, what is one that really challenged you and at the same time gave you a lot of satisfaction?
There's been a lot of them, actually. Every year I feel like I have a case that, boy, that was a difficult case. This year I had a young lady from Romania who's a movie director and was 25 years old, and we got her a visa for extraordinary ability. So that was really challenging. Normally it's for older people, but I had a couple of cases that over the years have been really satisfying. One of them you may remember is the Romanian stowaways case. Our office, when I started, and I still sometimes can't believe I did this, we took on the case of 30 Romanian stowaways, and we actually sued the government over their treatment. They were detained by the government. They were actually shackled, and they were not given hearings in front of an immigration court judge. And we actually changed the law by bringing action against the government and saying what they did was against the regulations. And so we actually got one of the regulations tossed out. And so that was really, really challenging. I worked as part of a team in that lawsuit and got to know some people who are actually high up now in the Obama administration advising the president on immigration. So it's really neat to me that I actually worked with these people who are amazingly smart and wonderful and did a great thing. So that case still really resonates a lot with me.
Well, we appreciate your generosity and your efforts to help the Romanian community with immigration issues, and we look forward to taking advantage of this new law. Hopefully they'll make some adjustments that more people can benefit from it.
I think they will. In closing, I want to mention a couple other parts of the law, if I may.
Sure.
That I think benefit Romanians. One of which is that the president announced at the same time, he signed an executive order that is expanding an entrepreneurial opportunity to people that have their own business in the United States or are inventors. So even if they're out of status. So we're waiting to see the details on that, but there's a lot of people in our community who meet that bill, who have a small business in a variety of different trades. So I think that's exciting. And also the president's order made it very much easier to sponsor people in different areas of skilled labor, such as someone who's a caregiver or a nanny, or someone who's an electrician, somebody that's here on a tourist visa that someone wants to sponsor. Much, much easier than it was prior to November 20th, 2014. And that change went into effect immediately.
Well, that's very important information. So if someone is in status now and they have a tourist visa and they have a sponsor who's willing to sponsor them, they could get an adjustment of status?
Yes, they can now apply for adjustment of status pretty immediately after the Labor Department. Before, they had to go back and wait in line, but now what the president did was to actually make a change in procedure to make sure that when we being the United States, when we have an immediate need for somebody in a certain profession, that that person can stay now, and they don't have to wait in line in Romania or anything. They can not only stay, but they can work and travel. So that's a very exciting change, and I think it affects our community quite a bit.
One other question, and I think this is an interesting one. What if a lady is pregnant and she's here and she's out of status? Is there something available for a case like that?
Sure, the new law. If the person's been here since January of 2010, the executive order doesn't say when the child has to be born. So I don't know if it's going to change once they get into detail or anything, but I don't see anything right now that says, wait a minute, no, I'm correcting myself. So they have to have, as of the date, they have to have the son or daughter, as of November 20th. So my apologies, I'm sitting and looking right here. That kind of person, unfortunately, it'd be hard unless they do change this part of the order. So my apologies.
Okay, well, it's good to know what's available, and if anything comes up, will you keep us posted?
Yeah,
if anything changes?
I will definitely do that. I think there will be some interesting things in the next year that we see as a result of this, and I'd be more than delighted to come back on the show, and thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure, as always. Again, I'm going to mention the number, and we're going to also put it on the screen. The phone number is 312-461-1199. You can call Robert Perkins at 312-461-1199 for additional information that relates to your particular case. Thank you so much again, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Vă mulțumim pentru că ați fost alături de noi. Vă dăm întâlnire data viitoare la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Față în Față. Aceasta a fost o ediție specială și vă mulțumim pentru că ați fost alături de noi.